I don't know why we thought it was a good idea to pull out that damn Ouija board that night. Maybe it was the whiskey or just the quiet boredom of an empty house. But I'll tell you this much. It's not a game. And now I never sit home alone at night. Not after what happened. It was supposed to be a simple Friday hangout at Matt's place. Just me, him, and Ashley, our usual crew. Matt had pulled the board from some dusty box in the garage, laughing like a kid who just found fireworks. It was old, the kind of old that smells like mildew and bad decisions. The board was warped. The letters and numbers faded like they'd been wiped at one too many times. The planchette, though, that was pristine, its smooth surface catching the light in a way that felt unnatural. We should have stopped when we opened it, and Ashley muttered, "This thing feels wrong." But Matt never listened. He set it up right there on the living room floor, cleared off the coffee table, and dimmed the lights. "It's just cardboard and wood," he'd said, smirking. "What's the worst that could happen?" Matt was always the cocky one. He loved playing up the bravado, like nothing could faze him. "Come on, don't chicken out," he said, nudging Ashley with his elbow. She rolled her eyes but sat down cross-legged on the floor. I hesitated, standing awkwardly by the couch. "You scared or what?" Matt taunted, waving the planchette in my direction. "Of course not," I shot back, though my gut was screaming otherwise. It wasn't the board itself that bothered me. It was the timing. There was something about that night, about the house, about the way the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. But I wasn't about to be the one who backed out, so I joined them. We each placed 2 fingers on the planchette, and for a moment, the room was painfully silent. The only sound was the faint creak of the house settling, and maybe the wind brushing against the windows. "All right," Matt said, grinning like he'd already won. "Who wants to ask the first question?" Ashley glared at him. "You dragged this thing out. You go first." He shrugged, leaning forward dramatically, as if this was some kind of performance. "All right, spirits of the Ouija board, we're here, ready to talk. If there's anyone with us, give us a sign." The planchette didn't move. For a second, I relaxed. Maybe this really was just a game after all. Then, something shifted. At first, it was subtle, the faintest creak from somewhere upstairs. I figured it was just the house, but Ashley's eyes darted to the ceiling. Matt chuckled nervously. "Old house," he muttered. "Let's keep going," I said quickly, hoping to push through the awkwardness. "Ask it something else." "Fine," Matt said, leaning in closer. "If there's a spirit here, tell us your name." That's when the planchette moved. It slid across the board, slow at first, like whatever was on the other side was testing the waters. I snatched my hands away. "You're doing that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dude, no, I'm not," Matt hissed. Ashley's hands were shaking, her fingers barely touching the planchette. It stopped on the letter E. The room felt colder, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones, that makes you shiver from the inside out. Then it moved again. I-L-Y. Ashley's breath hitched. "Emily," she whispered, barely audible. "Who's Emily?" Matt asked, glancing between us. I shook my head. "I don't know. I've never..." Before I could finish, the planchette shot to yes, forcefully this time, like someone or something was slamming it there. And then, from upstairs, we heard it. A laugh. Not the kind of laugh that makes you smile. This was high-pitched, childlike, but warped, like a record playing just a little too slow. Ashley screamed, her hands flying off the board. "That wasn't funny, Matt," she yelled, her voice trembling. But Matt wasn't laughing anymore. His face had gone pale, and for the first time, I saw something I'd never seen from him before. Fear. For a moment, none of us moved. The laughter from upstairs faded, leaving only an unnatural stillness in its wake. The air felt thick, like breathing through a wet towel. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break free from my chest. "Matt, seriously," Ashley said, her voice cracking. "Tell me you're messing with us." "I didn't do anything," Matt snapped, but his voice was shaky. He looked up at the ceiling, then back at the board. This isn't funny anymore." I wanted to say something, to tell them it was just the wind, the pipes, anything logical to stop the panic creeping up inside me. But then the planchette moved again. This time, none of us were touching it. It slid violently across the board, stopping on N. "Oh. No," I whispered. "What does that mean?" Matt stared at the board, unblinking. "What did you ask?" I hadn't realized I'd whispered it out loud until Ashley grabbed my arm. "Stop. Stop asking it questions." Before I could reply, the planchette shot to G-E-T. "Oh. U-T." Matt scrambled backward, knocking into the coffee table. "All right, we're done," he stammered. "This is over." But the board wasn't done with us. The lights flickered once, then again before cutting out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, and Ashley screamed. I fumbled for my phone, my shaking fingers barely managing to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, landing on Matt, who was staring at something behind me. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. I froze, my mouth going dry. "What? Don't turn around," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But of course I did. The flashlight's beam landed on the staircase. At first, I thought it was empty, but then I saw it. A figure, small and pale, standing halfway down the stairs. It was a little girl. She was dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned nightgown, the kind you'd see in black and white photos. Her hair hung in damp, stringy clumps over her face, and her head was tilted slightly to the side, as if she were curious. "Emily," Ashley whispered, her voice trembling. The girl took a step down, then another. Her bare feet made no sound against the wooden steps. "Stay back," I croaked, though my voice came out weak and useless. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her head tilting the other way. Then she smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was too wide, her teeth too sharp. And then she said, in a voice that didn't belong to her, "You invited me." My body wouldn't move. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but I was frozen in place, my flashlight trembling in my grip. Matt was muttering under his breath, words I couldn't make out, while Ashley clung to me so tightly it felt like her nails were digging into my arm. The little girl, Emily or whatever was pretending to be her, didn't move. She just stood there at the foot of the stairs, smiling that inhuman smile. Her head tilted again, like she was sizing us up, deciding what to do next. What do you want?" I finally managed to choke out. Her smile faded, slowly, unnaturally. Her mouth didn't just close. It seemed to fold into itself, her lips thinning until they were gone entirely. The skin where her mouth had been was now smooth and blank. I took an involuntary step back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. Then she pointed. Her small, pale hand rose, and her bony finger extended, shaking slightly as it aimed directly at me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the room was empty. Emily was gone. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Matt stumbled to his feet, grabbing the Ouija board and throwing it across the room. "We're done. We're done with this shit," he shouted, his voice cracking. But before the board even hit the ground, we heard it again, that laugh. It came from everywhere, echoing around us like the walls themselves were laughing. Ashley burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. "She's not gone. She's not gone. Shut up," Matt yelled, pacing back and forth. Just shut up. This isn't real." "It's not real." But it was. From the corner of the room, a shadow began to spread across the floor. It wasn't coming from anything. It just appeared, dark and liquid-like, oozing outward until it was inches from my feet. I stumbled backward, dragging Ashley with me. "What the hell is that?" I shouted. Matt didn't answer. He was staring at the shadow, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "It's her," he muttered. "It's her." The shadow began to rise, pulling itself up into a shape, a figure. It was too tall, too thin, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it took form. His head twisted, snapping into place with a sickening crack. "Leave us alone," I screamed, grabbing the flashlight and aiming it at the thing. The beam cut through the dark, but it didn't make it disappear. If anything, it seemed to grow darker, like the light couldn't touch it. Then it spoke, in that same warped, childlike voice. "You can't send me back." Ashley let out a strangled sob, and Matt dropped to his knees, clutching his head like he was in pain. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, trying to think of something, anything, and then I remembered the board. "Matt," I shouted. "The Ouija board. We have to close it." He looked up at me, his face twisted in confusion. "What? We didn't say goodbye," I yelled. "You have to end it. That's the rule." Matt scrambled to his feet, running to where the board had landed. The planchette was still on it, but it had moved. Now it was resting over the word "no." "Say it," I screamed. "Say goodbye." He grabbed the planchette, his hands shaking, and dragged it to goodbye. For a moment, nothing happened. The shadow figure stood there, motionless, its head tilted like it was waiting. Then it started to fade. Slowly at first, its edges dissolving like smoke. The laughter faded with it, until the room was silent again. And just like that, it was gone. We didn't say a word to each other after that. Matt burned the board in his backyard that night, and Ashley never came back to his house again. I don't blame her, but sometimes late at night when I'm home alone, I hear it. That laugh. And I know she's still out there, waiting for another invitation. You'd think that would have been the end of it. Burn the board, say goodbye, and forget the whole thing. But things like that, things like her, don't just go away. First, it was small stuff. A door creaking open on its own, lights flickering for no reason. I could write those off as my imagination or bad wiring. But then it got worse. It was about a week after we burned the board when I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth outside my bedroom door. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest as I lay there, too scared to move. "Matt," I called out instinctively before I remembered. I was alone. The footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. I reached for my phone, fumbling in the dark, and turned on the flashlight. The faint glow made me feel a little braver, so I swung my legs over the side of the bed and tiptoed toward the door. When I opened it, the hallway was empty. But something was wrong. The air was colder out there, heavy with the same oppressive feeling I'd felt the night we used the board. That's when I noticed it. Scratches. Long, deep gouges in the wood of the hallway floor, leading from the top of the stairs to my bedroom door. I followed the marks with my flashlight, my breath catching in my throat. The scratches weren't random. They formed letters, carved crudely into the wood. "I'm here." I slammed the door shut and shoved my dresser in front of it, not caring how loud I was being. I sat on my bed the rest of the night, clutching a baseball bat and staring at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen. The next morning, the scratches were gone. The floor was smooth, as if nothing had ever been there. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, that I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. The next time it happened, I wasn't alone. Matt had come over to check on me. He felt guilty, I think, for dragging the board out in the first place. We were sitting in the living room, playing some mindless video game, when Ashley called. I put her on speaker. "I can't sleep," she said, her voice tight and strained. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her." "See who?" Matt asked, though we both already knew the answer. "Emily," she whispered. "She's in my dreams. She just stands there, staring at me." "She's gone, Ash," Matt said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We said goodbye, we burned the board. She can't hurt you anymore." Ashley's laugh was bitter. "She doesn't need the board. She's already here." The line went dead. Matt and I stared at each other, unsure of what to do. Then the lights went out. This time there was no gradual flickering, no warning. Just instant, suffocating darkness. "Not again," Matt whispered, his voice barely audible. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it around the room. Shadows danced on the walls, stretching and warping with every movement. And then I saw it. The little girl, Emily. She was standing at the edge of the room, her head tilted at that unnatural angle, her smile stretched wide across her face. "Matt?" I whispered, nudging him with my elbow. He turned his head, saw her, and froze. "Don't move," he muttered. Emily took a step forward. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "You're not welcome here. Leave us alone." Her smile widened, her lips cracking and bleeding at the edges. "You brought me here," she said, her voice echoing strangely, like there were two people speaking at once. "You can't send me back." She lunged. The next few seconds were a blur of screams and chaos. Matt grabbed the coffee table and shoved it between us and her, but it didn't slow her down. The table splintered as she barreled through it, her small frame somehow impossibly strong. "Run!" Matt shouted, grabbing my arm and yanking me toward the door. We bolted out of the house, not stopping until we were halfway down the street. When we finally turned back, my living room window was lit up with a faint, eerie glow. And there, standing in the window, was Emily, watching, smiling. That was 2 days ago. I haven't been back to the house since. Ashley stopped answering her phone, and Matt's been acting like nothing happened, pretending it's all over, but it's not. I still hear her laugh. And last night, when I looked out my motel window, I saw her standing across the parking lot, waiting for me. I don't know what she wants. I don't know how to stop her, but I'm starting to think I won't live long enough to figure it out. I haven't slept in days. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. Not in dreams, no, that would almost be a mercy. I see her in the edges of my vision, just standing there, staring, like she's waiting for me to slip, to let my guard down. After we ran from the house, I stayed in a cheap motel on the edge of town. Matt promised to come back the next day with a plan. But when morning came, he never showed. His phone went straight to voicemail. That's when I realized I was alone. The motel room felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that eats at you. I kept the TV on for noise, but it didn't help. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of gravel in the parking lot, made my heart race. I knew she was close. I could feel her. Around midnight, I finally caved. I called Ashley. The line rang, and just when I thought it would go to voicemail, she picked up. Her voice was faint, distant, like she was underwater. "She's here," Ashley whispered. "What?" I stammered. "Where are you?" I can't leave," she said. "She won't let me." My stomach twisted. "Ashley, listen to me. Get out of there. Wherever you are, just run. I'll come get you." But she didn't respond. Instead, the line filled with static, and then that laugh. I hung up, my hands trembling. I don't know what possessed me to go back to Matt's house. Maybe I thought he'd be there. Maybe I thought I could end this once and for all. Or maybe I just didn't want to keep running. The house was dark when I pulled up, the windows like empty eyes staring out at me. I almost turned around and drove away, but something kept me there. A pull I couldn't explain. When I stepped inside, the air was freezing, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. "Matt," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. I made my way to the living room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The room looked the same as when we'd fled. Splintered coffee table, broken lamp, the faint smell of burnt wood from the Ouija board. But there was something new. On the floor, where the board had been, was a message. "Welcome back." My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the dark, and that's when I saw her. Emily. She was standing at the top of the stairs, her head tilted, her blank eyes boring into me. I backed away, but she moved faster than I thought possible. In the blink of an eye, she was inches from me, her face twisted into a grotesque smile. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice echoing in my head. "You're mine now." "Why?" I choked out. "Why are you doing this?" Her smile faltered. For a moment, she looked almost human. "You opened the door," she said softly, "and now it won't close." Before I could respond, the room began to shake. Pictures fell off the walls, the lights flickered wildly, and a deafening roar filled the air. Emily's face twisted back into that monstrous grin, and she lunged at me. I stumbled backward, grabbing the first thing I could find, a shard of the broken coffee table. I swung it wildly, and to my surprise, she stopped. Her smile faded, and for the first time, she looked scared. "No," she hissed, her voice trembling. "You can't." I didn't wait for her to finish. I thrust the shard into her chest, and the room erupted in blinding light. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. It's been a week since that night. I don't know what happened to Matt or Ashley. I've driven to their houses, but it's like they vanished. The house is empty now, boarded up and abandoned. But sometimes, late at night, I see a light in the upstairs window, and I still hear her laugh. I don't know if I got rid of her, or if I just made her angry. All I know is this: if you ever come across a Ouija board, don't touch it, because some doors once opened can never be closed.